You are folded into the purple like a secret, pressed between the velvet drape of an imperial bedchamber and the damp stone of the Palatine that smells of urine and roses. The city beyond is a distant chorus of carts and dogs. Inside, voices travel in the low fever of servants and the measured boots of the Praetorians. When the purple whispers, it speaks in orders, in jokes that are commands, in a softened cruelty that slides along the throat. You stand in the corridor where torches gutter and the air tastes of salt and oil. The emperor has been laughing for hours, a thin animal sound that scrapes the frescoed ceilings. You know his feet by the rhythm, short, restless, the tread of a man who measures time by who will obey him next. He wears a tunic trimmed in imperial dye, so rich it seems to bleed light. His hair is a child's cropped fringe, his face a fixed coin of delight and menace. Caligula, Gaius. You have learned to call him both and neither. They bring the boy, Gemellus, through the archway like a condemned thing. He is younger than you expected, his hands small, blindfolded with a bit of coarse wool tied too tight. His sandals slap at the marble. He trembles not from cold, but from the strain of a life made brittle by court intrigue. You have seen that particular stoop before, in men who have been measured against the emperor's whim and found wanting. The pool waits at the heart of the private bath, a square of black water rimmed with chipped mosaic. Lantern light slides across it. The sound is everything, the hush of feet, the scrape of a wristlet, the sudden exhale of someone unsteady on their toes. The Praetorians circle like oiled statues, faces blank and obedient. Even they who have swallowed violence whole look at this water as if it contains a god. Caligula is at the pool's edge, palms flat on the stone. He speaks softly, and the air leans in. You cannot unhear his voice, not the syllables, but the way he strings his cruelty into a lullaby. He calls the boy by a nickname the family used to use in kinder years, a poison of familiarity. He tells a story about tides. He tells a joke about how emperors must sometimes tidy the bloodline. The blindfold is stripped. Gemellus blinks, sees the emperor's face up close, skin luminous, eyes calculating affection as if testing for rot. The boy's jaw works. Perhaps he prays. Perhaps he thinks he might still bargain his way into mercy. You watch the moment a man surrenders to the water, the first inhale, the small, human gasp that insists on being measured. When Gemellus's head goes under, the world rearranges. The torchlight refracts, the mosaic becomes liquid maps of suffering. You can feel the pulse in your throat, the entire palace holding breath as if the city itself is a lung. There is a bureaucratic efficiency to the killing. There are orders. Scribes later will be able to trace the chain of who did what. But at this hour it is intimate, and intimate things are monstrous. The emperor's hand rests against the stone. He murmurs something about lineage, about purity, about play. The water accepts the body as if content to keep its secrets. You stand, a witness pressed into the margins, feeling the institutional silence. The state's machinery grinding smooth the edges of human horror until it is only ceremony. This is the empire as ritual, purple sewn into the bone, obedience made holy by repetition. You think, with a cold, private certainty, that the whispers will multiply, that what has been done will become a story told in the exhale of senators, in the laughter of courtiers, in the hushed prayers of servants who will carry this memory like a stone. Before we descend into the cold bedchambers of imperial madness, if you find meaning in bearing witness to history's quiet horrors, and that awful, fascinated dread, please consider hitting like and subscribing for more stories like this one. And wherever you are, comment below and let me know where you're listening from. Stay close. We're about to unmask how Caligula drowned his nephew and slept with his sister's corpse. You are the man who answers when the great doors of the palace whisper open, and the order, soft and absolute, slides down the chain of command like oil. You stand in a corridor that smells of salt and scorched oil, where the marble is pitted by generations of barefoot priests and restless emperors. The lamps gutter, their light beads on the wet floor, and turns each footprint into a tiny crescent moon that you will wipe away before morning. The sea is a constant presence here. You can hear it in the courtyard, the distant slap of waves against the harbor wall, in the salt that settles on your skin like a thin, patient scab. They bring him in a bundle of linen. His face is a child's face, swollen sweetly by water, a face you remember from portraits and coinage, soft jaw, a family mouth. The Praetorians move with the indifferent precision of those who have learned to enact civilizational violence as housekeeping. They lay him in the cradle room, a small chamber lined with cedar, and the air thickens with the institutional smell of power. Incense meant to sanctify, oil meant to preserve, and the metallic tang of routine blood. You are ordered to bring salt. You grind it between palms that have measured the weights of favors and punishments for years. The salt is coarser than that used in kitchens. It is pale as bone, and it bites at your skin as you sprinkle it. You think of the empire, the workshops that mined this mineral from brine and earth, the men in tunnels whose lungs built this preservation. You think of how every empire is, in some small and obscene way, a recipe, components gathered, boiled, down laid in layers to sustain a facade of immortality. You think these things and do not stop your hands. They press you to the ritual, rub, pack, fold. The linen takes the salt and drinks it, the damp puffing like a lung with each pat. The child's hair stiffens at the temples, and the salt crystals bite at the corners of his eyes. The light from the lamp sharpens into hard edges. You watch salt bloom into a network of white, like frost on a window that will not thaw. You think fleetingly of mothers at the docks who braid salt into their own hair to send luck to sailors. You think of how salt is used to ward, to preserve, to render the perishable permanent. You think of kings who must never rot. When you step back, the room tastes of iron. A servant argues softly with a captain. Orders, what they call mercy, have been carried out in the name of stability. The nephew, the fragile contingency of succession, has been salted to stave off a corruption the household calls destiny. You feel the institutional logic close around you. Decisions made in marble rooms, executed by hands like yours, justified by phrases that sound like law. You keep your mouth shut. You cannot see the emperor yet, but you can feel him, the arbitrary gravity of his presence, like a ship's hull pulling the tide. They wheel the child away in a brazier-lined cart, a cradle transformed into a vessel for preservation. You want to refuse, would rather fling the salt to the floor and let the sea reclaim what it has already taken. But you are both witness and instrument, a node in a system that grinds life into continuity. The salt on your fingers pricks you like conscience. You lick it off and the taste is righteous and foul, the salt of decisions small men make to keep the crown from tipping. Night presses. Somewhere a torch guttered, somewhere a voice laughs. The cradle is salted, and with it the notion that kings can be made immune. You stand in the corridor and feel the palace breathe. A monstrous lung that inhales the living and exhales the preserved, the dead becoming ornaments for an appetite that will not be sated. You are part of that breath, and it will not forget your name. You are seated on a throne that smells of sugar gone foul, a carved oak shell lacquered in gold that peels in thin, brilliant curls like scabbed sun. Under your skirts the velvet is damp with old wine. Under the wine something darker seeps, a slow blackness that has no name, but everyone in the palace knows the taste of it on the tongue. The palatine hums around you, servants with palms flowered by bread, priests clutching the laurel in trembling hands, the Praetorians whose faces are the same as the sharp edge of a coin. They come and go like insects, and you have taught them to fear the light enough that they prefer the shadows. You remember the river, not as a map shows a river, but as a sound in your teeth, the hollow push and suck when you forced him under. He was small and quick, a nephew who smiled like a child and called you uncle because he could not yet name treachery. The water took the gold rings first. They clinked against his ribs like distant bells. You watched bubbles rise and break on the surface, each one a secret you allowed to surface and then pop. You ordered the household to call it an accident, to weep with the proper cadence, and the Senate dutifully unspooled its soporific speeches. The law bent as a reed. You felt it spring in your hands and learned how to twist it. When Drusilla's fever took her, it was as if the city closed a great eyelid. You held her hair, wet with sweat and orange oil. You felt the shudder when she stopped answering to the world and kept answering only to you. They wrapped her in perfumed linen and placed her in the chamber that smelled of rose and iron. They came with silver and proclamations, the augurs muttering their starlit phrases, the priests drawing her into the circle of divinity by decree, Diva Drusilla. The Senate intoned, because you had said so, and the Senate trembles when you speak. You sleep beside her now, not as lovers sleep. There are no tender vows here, but as emperors secrete themselves beside power. Your cheek is pressed to the cool curve of her cheek, and you feel the inflexible order of a body that will not move. You do not close your eyes. You do not dare to admit that you hope for a twitch, a tiny rebellion, because hope might pull you under like a rope. The room is full of syruped incense. It pools at the base of the bed and attracts flies with a sweetness that makes you think of rot as something intimate, something to be sat upon like a throne. Outside, the Senate performs its formalities. Petitions filed, oaths recited, the clack of fastidious tongues that no longer bite. The courts are not instruments of justice, but gears in a machine whose grease is your whim. Magistrates dress their sentences in the language of the Republic, while their hands tremble with the memory of your foot. You have taught the city to obey the softest cruelty, the cruelty that smells of violets and honey and makes men smile as they die. In the night a guard enters and lays a crown of myrtle at your feet, then leaves without looking back. You lift it and weigh it. It is both warmer and fouler than you expected. You are the pivot on which ceremony and corruption spin. You sit and feel the institution lean into you like an old lover. In the mirror of the window, the moon hangs like a pale coin above the Tiber, and you see your face reflected thin and foreign, an emperor crowned not by a people, but by the slow, inevitable sweet rot of everything you have allowed to fall asleep. You are the man who holds the cup the moment the world asks you to be its witness. You stand in the low light of the triclinium, the mosaics underfoot whispering tessellated fish and laurels, oil lamps guttering like a procession of eyes. The emperor is at the head of the table, thin in the lamplight, a child's laugh folded into a tyrant's cruelty, wrapped in purple so deep it drinks the light. Around you, senators, freedmen, priestly men in palliums and soldiers in bronze stand as a congregation of petrified witnesses. Their breathing is a single, slow, shameful bell. You remember the night of the drowning because the memory lives in your fingers. They came for the boy with the practiced hands of men who handle rope and chain. They took him by the shoulders as if easing a fevered child into sleep. They made him count stars underwater until his lungs learned the taste of sea. You can feel that water still in your bones. You have scrubbed soap into your cuticles until the nails bled and the odor of brine would not lift. Now they set him on the table. His skin is the pallor of newly minted marble, hair matted like seaweed, lips purple with recent depth. Caligula lifts the body by one shoulder as if it were an offering, as if the empire were a table laid for his private rites. He laughs. There is no warmth in it. He presses his mouth to the boy's throat, and in a motion at once obscene and intimate, draws forth a bead of blood that gleams like a small red sun. The cup in your hand tilts forward as if pulled by secret strings. The basin fills. Wine rushes in to disguise what it cannot cleanse. You pour. The metal of the cup sings as blood and Falernian meat. The smell is iron and honey, the room suddenly a throat. You present it to the nearest senator. He takes it like a man who takes an oath, lips parted, eyes dry. He swallows. Others turn away and hurl their goblets, but the praetorian nearest you strips them by force and pours again. The ritual is precise. An empire baptized in transgression, held together by the thin leather of fear. And there, not 3 couches away, is Drusilla, or what remained of her. He had taken the body to his bed before this, they said, had lain with the corpse in some nameless devotion that felt like prayer and profanity braided together. Tonight she is propped among garlands, an altar of linen, her face made immaculate by the hands of men who possessed soap and saw no sin. Caligula leans toward her as you serve. His forehead brushes paper skin and he murmurs. To her as a priest might to a goddess. The sound is private and the room, despite its fullness, becomes a sanctuary for his delusions. You tell yourself you are only doing your job. You line up goblets, rehearse a neutral face, count the breaths between courses. But your hands remember every push beneath that water, recall the way the boy's fingers twitched as if answering an impossible question. The wine slides down your throat, warmed and coppered by the blood. You think to spit. Your mouth is ready. The floor is ready. The Praetorian's shadow reaches over you. The law has become an order shaped like a crime. You lift your own cup, and for a dizzy moment you think of the gods, of Jupiter on his throne, of augurs whose birds once told futures you no longer believe. The room waits and you drink. The taste is the empire. The taste is obedience. You move through the palace as one who already carries a mausoleum within his chest. The Palatine night breathes cool against your skin, torches gutter in brackets like dying suns, casting the purple folds of your couch into the black of sacrificial petals. You have had them carry her to you in linen still powdered with the ash of the pyre. No, not the pyre they ordained, for you did not trust flame to finish her. The priests wrote decrees on wax. The Senate muttered and signed their names with hands that shook for gold. They called her diva. They carved her name into temples and minted her face into bronze. They made a religion of the absence she left behind. All of it come to this bed. You lay the bones out like a map, ribs arching like the bow of some small ship, clavicles that make islands under your fingers. The skull looks up at you with the polite blank of marble. The eye sockets are already temples you can fill. You tuck her clavicle beneath your chin, as if to keep it warm, and the bone is colder than any winter the Tiber has seen. It sings, no, not with music, but with the soft, dry accord of something that has been pressed and labeled, inventoried by clerks in the imperial household. The chief steward keeps ledgers of grief. You breathe in the scent the embalmers left, myrrh that smells of distant markets, crushed rose that tastes of summers you stole from childhood, cedar smoke that belongs in the armories of the Praetorian. Beneath that perfume is the honest odor of what cannot be perfumed away, damp earth and the loss of breath. Your own heart is a gavel striking the same rhythm the Senate wanted. You remember the sentences they read to you as if in cadence. Consul, Imperator, son of the deified. You remember the way they relented when you told them to agree that death had not ended her office. Outside the curtains the palace hums with its institutions, the guards on their posts, the scribes copying funeral edicts, the priests arranging incense like a liturgy that serves your appetite. The Praetorians are a wall you have purchased. Their loyalty is in coin and in the gleam of their helmets. Those helmets reflect candlelight off the marble, so that passers-by see 1,000 small suns, and in each a complacent face. They allow you this bed, as the Senate allows a god his altar. Because in Rome the line between sacrament and crime is what you declare it to be. You think she is listening, though she can no longer answer. You think she is pleased that you have wrapped her ribs in brocade, that you have placed her head upon the pillow where you once whispered promises that meant nothing then and everything now. You press your face to the hollow of her shoulder and imagine speech returning to bone, the syllables of your name curling like smoke across dry cartilage. Your hands do not tremble, they catalogue. Fingers trace the sutures of a skull as a magistrate would trace a law. In the stifled hours you are both emperor and supplicant, a man who has turned sovereign power into a small private litany. The institutional machinery of Rome continues beyond your curtains. Ledgers balance, senators dine, priests chant the state cult. And because all of it beholds you and does not stop you, the horror is not merely in what you do, but in what they will not forbid. You smooth the linen, lie back, and let the bones become the mattress that supports the empire you have made of absence. Outside, the city forgets itself. Inside, you count the ribs and lose the number until even grief becomes a law you can bend. You are led past a row of sleeping sentries, the Praetorians' breath like the undercurrent of a storm. Their helmets lie polished on benches, Their spears catch the torchlight and throw it back in thin, accusing lines. The corridor narrows, becomes a throat, and you swallow the scent of frankincense and something fouler, stagnant water, iron, and the dull sweetness of perfume gone rancid. In the inner chamber a bronze mirror hangs, hammered by some Eastern artisan. Its face is too still, as if it too refuses to look away. You stand at the threshold and the world tilts. There he is, Caligula, less emperor than a ruin pretending to be a man. He has taken the place of the high priest. He has taken the place of the mourner. He sits on a couch draped in purple, the dye like bruises. Around him, attendants hold censers, their smoke making slow, blind spirals. His hand rests on the white wood of a bier, the grain already soft under the palms of a man who has given himself to ritual and to ruin. The corpse is laid out with garlands. Even death has been made to wear finery. You can smell the oils. They tried to make her beautiful again. Myrrh, cassia, the sharp sweetness of rosemary. Your throat tightens. You watch him lean in, not with the swagger of a conqueror but the hushed, careful movements of one who kneels before an idol. He presses his forehead against her forehead. No kiss confesses something that words cannot, and for a breath you think you hear him pray. The room contracts into the space between their brows, empress and emperor, or emperor and relic. The household, by decree, has learned to call her Augusta, to set up altars, to accept that the dead may still command a living throne. The Senate has been bullied into worship. The priests have stitched vows to falsehood. You have watched the machinery of Rome convert grief into doctrine overnight. From the mirror's face, the two of you look out at the same slow, falling world, and there is no comfort in the reflection. Your own eyes seem older, catalogued by a ledger of trespasses. The drowning in the Tiber a fortnight past, the whispered sanction that unmoored a nephew from the river as if he were a loaf of bread. You had argued, deferred, counted the coin of silence. You told yourself the river would wash the stain. Now the stain reappears on the cast bronze, a smear of water that is not water. You tell yourself this is piety, that the emperor has turned to sanctity to hold his hand steady. You tell yourself it is the way of an unstable man to build altars out of catastrophe. But the room knows better. The step of the sentry who cannot meet your eyes. The way a priest's hand trembles when sprinkling consecrated water. The catalogue of names carved into the praetorium's ledgers and then crossed out. The institutional breath of Rome has become a confession booth and an executioner, one and the same. Outside, the city sleeps under a thin silver of moon. Inside, the mirror holds the two of you, and you realize it is not reflecting the dead alone, but the empire that will be shaped in the shadow of this bed. The emperor murmurs again, a litany in a voice made of silk and wrought, and you find your own lips shaping the words he has asked you to teach the people. Praise, obedience, myth. You are part of the altar now, part guard, part worshipper, part witness, and the mirror gives back your face with the patience of a thing that has seen far worse. You do not know which of you is looking at whom. The room says nothing. It only keeps its records. You are seated in the hollow of the Curia, where Rome's dust congregates in the grooves of marble like old prayers. The room breathes in torches, slow, sullen exhalations that smear the walls with black. Your toga falls about your knees like a shroud. The purple stripe is a bruise. You tell yourself it is only form, the curule chair, the fasces leaning like spears at the threshold, but your hands know the shape of mourning. They have learned to fold and fold again until the fold becomes joint and bone. Around you, men who once thundered law into the forum sit as if embalmed. Their voices come out in the thin way of things that will not live long, a rasp, a half-remembered syllable. The lictors stand at attention, faces blank as masks, hands resting on axe hafts. They are the pallbearers of an institution that has become a coffin. Each step they take is a measured lowering. You remember a time when the Senate House bled argument, the clash of rhetoric like flint on steel. Now the rostra is a mouth with no tongue. Decrees are read by freedmen whose collars still smell of the Palatine. They carry a scroll like a bone and unroll it with the reverence of a priest revealing a relic. The words are not yours. When the clerk says the emperor wills this or wills that, you feel the syllables drop into your chest like pebbles. Your decision is a soundless ritual. You move your lips, but the motion is a fossil. There is a taste on the air tonight that is not smoke. It is copper and brine, as if someone somewhere had dragged salt water through the city's arteries and left it to rot. The story, whisper it and you blister the tongue, is a child swallowed by night, damp in the gutters, a nephew's laughter turned to water. The rumor folds itself into every other silence, a fishbone lodged behind the teeth of official speech. No one mentions it. He who names the godless thing will be the next to hear the knock. You watch a man across the bench press his palm flat to a wax tablet. The seal is pressed, the impression is round and final, a small black moon. Each pressed seal is an epitaph. The act looks like writing, but the letters belong to someone else already. The wax is warm and malleable under the lictor's eyes. The sound of the seal is soft as a tombstone being set. Outside, the city breathes on with traffic of carts and clanging of temple bells. Inside, history is being interred. A senator coughs, not the cough of age but of fear, and two men whose names you have known since boyhood glance at him as you would a corpse that twitches. The consul gestures, the session moves on. You memorize the cadence of compliance as if learning a new prayer. Your inner voice, the one that once argued Cicero's subtleties, now keeps a ledger of small resistances. A delayed nod, a throat cleared when a decree binds a friend. Each hesitation is a small grave you dig with your fingernails. You imagine the curia's doors closing and being sealed, the rafters tightened, the torches guttering. In this room, vows are spoken into coffins, laws signed into sleep. The Senate has not been destroyed by fire or sword. It has been shut and shelved, its address engraved in silence. You silence yourself, not as a sacrifice but as an act of preservation. You sit very still, feeling the marble cold through your soles, listening to the slow, patient tick of a republic being nailed shut, plank by plank. You are kneeling on cold stone where the Palatine breathes its slow, mildew-sweet breath, the torchlight slinking across columns like the tongues of court informants. A chalice lies in front of you, rim corroded, silver gone to a bruise black. Men whose faces the Senate once taught you to respect have come to touch it like a relic of a plague. They call it nothing, just a cup, but you know what names fear cannot bear to speak. You are the one who holds it. The room smells of wax, wine gone rancid, and the iron-thin memory of a drowned boy. Water still clings to your sleeves, as if the Tiber itself grudges that wash. You can feel the salt in the seams where you stitched the leather straps to your sword. The conspirators' whispers slide over you, careful, like blades, but you hear more than their words. You hear the empire in their silence. The Senate's throat closing, the Praetorian's teeth bared behind a polite smile, the imperial household's rituals turned into superstition. It is institutional horror, a thing codified as law until law itself dissolves beneath the emperor's feet. You bring the chalice to your face. It is warm from palms, blackened where someone's fingers have cupped it for years. Up close you see not only stains but fingerprints, arches and whorls like the maps of ruined provinces, and a smear of something darker in the trench around its base. Your own reflection is a ghost in it, split and trembling. For a moment you taste only the copper of your own fear and the resin of torch smoke. You imagine what this cup has drunk. Wine, oil, the salt-laced water from a basin where a nephew's legs found no footing and the emperor laughed at the ripples. Behind the screens, the corpse of a sister lies as if made of alabaster and seaweed. Drusilla's hair, when the torchlight finds it, is like a drowned reef. The bedcloths have a slope to them from where he pressed his bone against her. A captain of the guard swore he saw the emperor lift her as one might lift a consecrated offering. You did not see it. No honest man would. But your hand remembers the wetness of a life passing through your fingers, and your stomach knots with images you cannot disremember. You are supposed to call this justice, to call it liberation. Instead, you hold the blackened chalice and feel the city press in around you, all its institutions, senate, law, priesthood, barracks, twisted into an apparatus for private vice. The pact you are about to make is not with gods, but with a system that has become a man. You think of oaths sworn. On the vestal flame and laugh, a sound that can barely be called human. One of the conspirators leans forward, the scrape of his boots on marble like a verdict. His hand hovers over the cup. His thumb catches on the nick where some tooth once knocked it. You lift the chalice to your lips because that is what covenants taste like here. Not sanctity, but the cold smear of necessity. The liquid inside is blackened wine, boiled down and bitter. It tastes of laurel leaves trodden underfoot and of the Tiber when it remembers a body. You drink. The taste is a promise that curdles on your tongue. You feel the institution's machinery click into place. The Senate's grudging nods, the coup's cold choreography. And for a single, dizzy instant, you understand what it means to make the state complicit in a private grotesque. The chalice is passed, and you watch the faces take it, one by one, each a marker in the ledger of guilt. You are not sure whether you are pouring out a tyrant or sealing the empire's final devotion to its own rot. The blackened chalice meets the lips of the next man, and in the hush that follows you hear only the slow, measured breathing of a city braced for drowning. You are kneeling on cold marble, while the world above you crowns itself in small cruelties. The torches in the atrium sputter as if trying to breathe around the weight of someone's madness. Their tongues throw the purple of Tyrian dye into a color so obscene it is almost holy. He sits on the imperial couch like a man who has hollowed himself out and left his bones as an audience. And you are the hand that must perform the old rites as if they still mean anything. They press the laurel into your fingers, fresh, glossy, smelling of rain and something metallic that makes your mouth water with old fear. It should be victory. It should smell of triumphal arches and captured standards. Instead it smells of riverweed and the thing that drowned in it. You think of the nephew, how the palace bath ran late into that night, and how a child's laugh was swallowed by the pipes, and the laurel's leaves lay against your palm like a list of accusations. The green is still slick. Sap runs down your wrist and you wipe it on the hem of a tunic that will never be clean. The silvered blade is delivered with a whisper. A praetorian passes it to you as if offering a liturgy. Its metal is bright as an omen, the kind of brightness that insists on being noticed in a room built of shadow. The guard's helmet has a smear of something on its cheek, wine or rust, you cannot tell, and his eyes do not meet yours. Institutional hands move in their rehearsed choreography. The lictors form a frame, the freedmen make the air smell of oil and old bread, the women of the household pretend not to listen. You imagine the Senate in its marble theater, applauding the seal on a sentence they could not prevent. You taste salt. He watches you with a patience that is not kindness. When you lift the laurel to his brow, you feel the weight of every wreath ever given in Rome, the accumulated honor and theft of centuries, folded into a circle that now, absurdly, sits atop a head that thinks it a god. His fingers close around a curl and you feel knuckles like small cliffs. He hums no melody, only a rhythm like an oar against dark water. A laugh maybe, a cough maybe. He will name it a triumph and they will call it empire. You place the wreath, and the laurel bites, stems pricking your skin as if the plant itself refuses to bless this. The silvered blade catches a torch and throws back a shard of light. You hold it because you must, because there is always a sharp thing near the throne in this house, because silence often needs a body to fall against. Your reflection stares from its face, your own eyes, widened, wet. In the metal you see not only your face but the house of power behind you, reflected in fragments. A tapestry of gods with faces washed out, a bust of Augustus turned to look the other way, the Senate's ledger closed like a tombstone. Someone in the background repeats ritual phrases, words meant to sanctify. They sound like a prayer scraped across a stone. You wonder when the instruments of state stopped serving the public and started serving appetite. The laurel that once crowned victories now masks something else. The blade that should make offerings is polished to show the emperor his own face. The palace inhales and holds that breath. You are the small organ within a greater machine of quiet cruelties. a hand keeping time with the slow, institutional heart that now prefers its blood to be tidy, its verdicts ceremonial. You slide the laurel stems between palms damp with sap and something darker. You imagine the river waiter in which a child learned silence. You imagine where the silver will shine next. The world around you continues its performance. You have to stay still until the scene is done, until the laurel and the blade return to their places at the edge of a history that will call this order. You are part of the audience and the stagehand both, and the only choice you have is how long to keep your eyes open. You are up before dawn because the house has not yet dared to become a home. The lamps gutter their last in the atrium, and beyond the columns, the city is a throat of fog and pigeons. You walk the Palatine corridors whose frescoes are still wet with the story he liked to tell of himself. River gods, victorious chariots, a small face lifted to kiss an emperor's ring, and taste ash on your tongue as if you have already swallowed the fire. They have brought the urn into the imperial cubicula as if it were an honored guest. It sits on a low alabaster table, a pale heap of winter. Human weather-made dust, compressed into a small, traitorous mound. The Praetorian at the door has his hand on the pommel of his sword but does not look at the urn. He looks at you, and his eyes are a ledger of what must be kept silent. The air smells of myrrh and scorched hair, of oil gone wrong. When you lean closer, the ash breathes out like an old man coughing. Someone has set the diadem across the ridge where a brow once might have been. It is absurdly large for such a ruin. Gold tolerates decay the way rot tolerates moths. Jewels glitter with the same indifferent appetite that had devoured the boy in the river and the women in the private rooms. You see, in the play of light on emerald and on the dull powder beneath, the old thing that used to make people kneel. The diadem still has the gravity of command. It pins the ashes like a monarch pins a cloak. You remember the night the nephew went under, the Tiber taking his breath like a gambler sweeping coins, because memory has to have a witness and you were paying attention. You remember the sound of the water, the flat, dull sound of things making no protest. You remember the way his mother's hands trembled like a seal. In the months after, the emperor would stand at windows and make jokes about drowning, the iron taste of pretense in his mouth. Institutional cruelty is not always loud. It is the slow calculus of decrees and favors, the polite hands that push, the chambers that do their work without admitting they are doing it. Now the same machinery grinds in softer gears. Men in togas mumble the words that will press the authority of Rome over soft mortal ends, a divinity declared, an office cleansed, pensions allotted. The archives will record a date and a name, officious ink will give ritual to the ruin. You watch a scribe dip a quill and hesitate, as if he can choose where the ash will fall on the page. His hand shakes and the ink blots like a small, obscene bruise. You think of the sister, how they said he had loved her with the kind of hunger that becomes religion. You think of the rumor, the locked door, the velvet and mildew of a bed abandoned before dawn. You think of how, even when flesh is reduced to dust, the state still knows how to dress it. The statute will decree worship, priests will be paid, the praetors will wear his portrait as they march. Power outfits itself in ritual the way mourners outfit themselves in black, necessity fashioned into spectacle. You reach out because the urge to touch is as human as breath. Your fingertips find gold, cold and deliberate. A smear of soot clings to your skin like a confession. You bring that smear to your lips and taste nothing but empire, metallic, inevitable, and in that flavor you hear the city making its bargains again. Ashes wearing the diadem, and the diadem refusing ever to be alone.